So in this video, we're going to take a look at Roman imperialism. And so to begin with, it should be noted that our word imperialism comes from the Latin imperium. And so this word conveys something of the idea of an autonomous power or a command, some idea of authority that is being granted to individuals. So in order to control the vast territories that the Romans had gained, either through their conflicts or through acquisitions and some other means, they needed to set up oversight. And so they provided these provincial governors, you might call them. We see names of these individuals, something like a consul or praetors, and they are appointed for a one-year term. Now, several of these consuls, praetors are going to rule subsequent years, but they're these kind of one-year terms. And so that's, again, trying to control how long, with the damage that can be done by a governor over a period of time, and if there was a need to replace them. So these one-year terms. These governors had the command, like that of military commanders. So, of course, participation in the military was a huge way that individuals rose in rank and stature and prestige. And so they were oftentimes then thought of being able to command, being able to exert the type of authority that would be needed in order to launch, as it were, military actions in regions. And so they were given a great deal of freedom to rule over subjects as they saw fit, so long as taxes were gathered. So these new territories would have to be paying taxes to the Romans. And as long as taxes were gathered, as long as insurrections were quashed, so it's very important that these commanders have this ability to see threats to Roman power or Roman resistance to Rome, and so being able to quash those quickly and effectively. If a governor shows an inability to address or deal with insurrections or revolts or rebellions, then they could quickly lose that position or that role. Roman governors were often more interested in what took place back in Rome than the concerns of their subjects. So becoming a governor was really seen as a means of moving up in rank, moving up in prestige and honor. And so going out to these frontiers is not the desirable end. You're really seeing it as a stepping stone to moving somewhere else. And so what the subjects really needed was less of an interest to these governors. Governors and their staffs had to pay their own expenses, so that meant that they often came from wealthy families. So you're going to have to take care of moving expenses and your servants' expenses and all the things that you require to feed yourself and take care of your family. So that meant you're going to come from wealthy families in order to do that. So because it was expensive to serve as a governor, they're going to find ways to enrich themselves through their appointments. So that means they're oftentimes going to be engaged in ways in which they can take money or be involved in briberies in order to allow for different people to do the things that they want to do. So some governors were prosecuted for corruption, so there could be limits. There's a case of a Roman governor by the name of Verus, who is going to be prosecuted. It's quite hard to get prosecuted as a governor. You're going to have a senator who is convinced that the governor has engaged in some type of corruption and ought to be tried. And that senator is going to have to bring this case to the rest of the Senate. And so, going to be hard sometimes in order to get a senator to be so concerned about what's happening in these provinces, especially if the governor is able to successfully bring taxes and quash insurrections. So, but if there's enough outcry and if there's enough instability in an area because of corruption, enough gossip that there is a senator or there's a governor engaged in unjust practices, and that is increasing hatred towards the Romans and inability to cooperate with the Romans, then in those situations, someone might be brought to the Senate's attention. So in 27 BCE, Augustus is going to enact the Act of Settlement. So this is going to consolidate power, and it's going to improve oversight of all the many provinces. Now you'll see on the slide that there is a map of the provinces. Now this is a map illustrating the Roman Empire by AD 125 or 125 CE, so much later in the time of Augustus, but just demonstrating the expanse of the Roman Empire. Basically, they have everything surrounding the Mediterranean Sea. And but as they increase these areas and these regions, Augustus is trying to consolidate power, and he's going to want to improve oversight of these provinces, since there are occasions when you have governors who are engaged in unscrupulous behavior. So provinces were divided up then into senatorial or imperial provinces. The former were overseen by a proconsul. So you want to see some illustrations of proconsuls, take a look in the New Testament. You want to take a look at Acts 13 and verses 7 through 8 and verse 12. Also in Acts 18 verse 12 and in Acts 19 verse 38. And the latter, these imperial provinces were overseen by the emperor through the military. So these imperial provinces were usually on frontiers because these were areas that had more resistance to Roman rule. And so the military played a much more important role in quashing uprisings and resistance to them. So divided up pretty much between these two, one kind of being overseen by the senators, the other being overseen by the emperor. So proconsuls did not have to consult either with the Senate or the emperor in making decisions. They were given a great deal of kind of autonomous power to exercise what they thought was in the best interest of the subjects or the best interest of Rome, in order to maintain the peace. It wasn't until the 2nd century CE that proconsuls answered directly to the emperor. So much later period where that had to happen. So come to now this, how did Palestine, this area of Judea, Galilee, Samaria, Perea, others, how did they fit in this whole kind of structure that Rome was developing? Well, the Emperor Augustus deposed Archelaus. So Archelaus was the son of Herod the Great, and when Herod the Great died, Archelaus wanted to rule over his father's kingdom, but the Roman, government decided not to allow him to have all that area. Instead, there was a will. Herod had a will, and Archelaus was claiming that the will gave him the kingdom, but there were other brothers, particularly Antipas, who also made a claim for that kingdom. And so the decision was basically to divide up Herod's kingdom under different kind of jurisdictions. So Antipas is going to be given the area of Galilee and Perea, but Archelaus is going to be given Judea, which will include Jerusalem. So all this is happening in the 1st century CE after Herod's death. So somewhere around 4 or 5 BCE. So Archelaus is going to rule Judea. He wanted to wear the name king like his father did, but he was not given permission by Rome to do that. But unfortunately for Archelaus, this is a time that he is not very effective as a ruler of the area. There's some insurrections that occur that he's not able to deal with. It's going to involve more direct Rome intervention to quash the insurrection and to punish the insurrectionist with crucifixion. And so this is a turmoil time. We will see something about Archelaus really in the Gospel of Matthew, talking about the birth of Jesus, who was born during the time of Herod the Great, and then, but because of dream warning Joseph that the child's life is in danger, Joseph takes Mary out of the area. They're in Bethlehem near Jerusalem, and they're going to go to Egypt. And then after Herod's death, they're going to decide to come back to the area. So in the book of Matthew, it looks as if like Joseph's home is in Bethlehem, but he decides not to go to Bethlehem because Archelaus is the ruler, and he hears that things are not well under Archelaus, or he feels in threat to go to Judea. So he goes to Galilee and ended up going to Nazareth in Galilee. This was Herod Antipas's area. So Judea was not an independent senatorial or an imperial province. So when we think about Judea, it's not one of these provinces, but it's become part of Syria, which is a province, and it's under the authority of the governor, the legate Publius Sulpicius Quirinius. Now, the name Quirinius, people have read the Gospel of Luke, they will have seen that name, Quirinius. And so Judea is now a part of Quirinius's oversight. And so Archelaus is no longer going to be the one who is ruling over this area. While Herod Antipas ruled over Galilee and other territories until about 39 BCE, so father dies somewhere around 4 or 5 BC, so he's going to rule over Galilee and these other areas for quite some time. Judea is going to be governed by prefects from 6 to 41 CE. So at the time that Quirinius has takes over in Syria and has his census to see how many people are there in his province. They're going to set up these prefects. So 6 CE is when Archelaus has been deposed, and then we're going to start seeing direct rule. So this rule, as it were, by locals. So Herod the Great had been an Idumean. You can see there on that little map where Idumea is, way down the south. He comes from Idumea. He wasn't really a Jew, but he becomes kind of king of the Jews. He's not Jewish. And then he has several different marriages, and some of his children are born through marriages with some who are women who are Jewish. And so Herod Antipas is one of these locals who is ruling over Galilee. But now, instead of a local like Archelaus ruling, you're going to have these prefects who are of Rome descent who are going to govern the area. So that's really what we think of when we think Pontius Pilate. He's like a prefect of Judea. So for a few years, after around 41, so prefects rules Judea in 41 up to 41. From 41 to 44, there's a slight little change where now Agrippa, a grandson of Herod the Great, is going to govern Judea. And so this is found in Acts 12 when it talks about King Herod. If someone is not familiar enough with this history, they can misunderstand. King Herod is not Herod the Great, is not Herod Antipas. This word Herod is referring to Agrippa, who is allowed to wear the name king, at least as far as the book of Acts is concerned. So he rules, but you can see that it's for a very short time. So it just seems to be very hard for locals to, and I guess his death, but it just seems like Rome tries or experiments with locals ruling, but ends up each time making a different decisions. So basically, from 44 to 70 CE, so at the time when there's going to be an insurrection, a rebellion in Jerusalem. Really, it starts in Galilee, but it moves itself down into Jerusalem. Judea is going to be run by these procurators. So we've moved from prefects, now we move to procurators. And then after 70 CE, it's going to be ruled by Roman legates. So again, these military leaders. So there's a lot of kind of turmoil that is going on in Judea, not so much up in Galilee, but for Judea, there's a lot of kind of change as they're trying to decide how best to administer the area. It does look like the time of the Jesus ministry and the beginning of the early church, there's at least been this a few years as Judea is governed by these prefects, and then as Judea is going to be governed for a few years by Agrippa, and then by these procurators. So during the time that the early church is beginning, this is the experience that they are having with Roman imperialism. So we will stop that there, and that gives a kind of a brief little view of Roman imperialism, especially as it applies to the beginning of the Jesus movement.